Hi there guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons, Season 32, reviewed. This was the year the show finally reached 700 episodes. It goes to show both how far the show came, and how far I have come in reviewing it. Some things to note about this season. This was around the time that race was a big topic in America, so The Simpsons followed the lead of many other shows, and decided to have no white actor play non-white characters. This led to the voices of Coral, Lou, and many others being changed. Now you guys know my opinion on this stuff. I think it's PC nonsense, to be honest. Actors should be able to play people of any colour as far as I'm concerned. Despite that though, as long as the new actors actually sound somewhat like the characters we know, I guess I can live with it. We'll just have to see about that as we go. More than anything, I just hope this turns out to be a reasonable watch, because last season was a bit of a drag. Anyway, as always, there is a link in the description to the Simpsons wiki, if you're interested, and with that out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? Season 32, Episode 1, Undercover Burns. Mr. Burns finds out that his employees don't like him, so he goes undercover in a robot suit to try and find out what people are saying about him. My trivia for this one is that this is the first episode where Alex stays there, voices Coral, taking over from Hank Azaria. And in fairness, his performance was alright. I wasn't massively taken aback listening to his version of Coral or anything, so I guess that's the best I could hope for. And my best moment was the kids' shocked reaction to Homer wanting to go to work. The season opener got a 3 out of 5. This was a weak 3, but it got there for me because there was some goofy fun in Burns spying on his workers by putting on this elaborate robot suit. Of course, Homer and his friends were too stupid to realise that it was Burns, but in fairness to them, Fred did come across as a type of guy who would appeal to them. I enjoyed some of the scenes of them hanging out together, which made me accept the goofy premise a bit more. You could argue that Burns should not care about what his employees think of him. That plot point is becoming a bit overused lately in my opinion. But again, the ending fight between him and a now sentient Fred was silly in a fun way. And Burns did discover his evil instincts again by the end. The jokes here were decent, my favourite being Bart, Lisa and Maggie not being able to believe that Homer was actually enjoying work. Season 32, Episode 2, Carumbus. At a museum on ancient Rome, the family imagine a Roman version of what would happen if Homer was more ambitious. So the episode title here is a reference to Bart's catchphrase I Caramba, as well as a novel and television series I Claudius. And my best moment was the battle between Obesius and Bartigula. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. My original instinct was to give this a 2, because it wasn't that entertaining. The show often struggles with transporting the characters into historical or fictional settings in a way in which they can still land jokes which feel believable to the characters we know. That was kind of the same here. I did like Homer's character, the aptly named Obesius, getting fatter as the years went on, and there was the odd good line from him, but the rest of the comedy wasn't really to my taste. The story here though was very solid, and every scene had a reason to be there. Whether it be Obesius gaining power by killing people after being pressured by the evil version of Marge, or the simple scene with the slaves, showing how corrupted by power he had become. He does eventually realise the error of his ways though, and after Bartigula becomes the new emperor, you want to see Obesius defeat him for the good of the people. The final battle in the Colosseum was pretty fun, even though it was quite violent and bloody. I think it added to the scene in this case. This is meant to be ancient Rome after all. This definitely had plenty there to be engaged with, it just never had the great moments to make it really memorable. Season 32, Episode 3, Now a Museum, Now You Don't. While Lisa stays home from school to explore the wonders of Western art, she has 3 fantasies about famous artists. So my trivia for this one is that at the end of Act 3, if you're paying attention, you will notice that there is a mural featuring Mindy Simmons. And my best moment was Moe's song at the end. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. Well, I just said that the show often struggles with the old and fictional settings, so having 2 episodes like that in a row is kind of asking for trouble, especially a trilogy episode as well. The problems of us not caring about these random versions of the characters are just amplified with that. Neither the characters or the stories had enough about them to stand out individually. Lisa being a famous artist has been done better before, so the first part was a full swing and miss. The second part was meh. I like that it found a way to use Maggie in one of the old stories, but that's about it. And the third segment just kind of happened. I almost drifted off to sleep, not gonna lie. The Bernie Sanders joke, which went on for far too long, just about summed it up. I mean, it's not like the other attempts at jokes were much better, in fairness. The French Millhouse saying, "I only got C's," was okay, I guess, but I'm really stretching there. The ending bit of Vincent Van Moe was the only thing which stopped me giving this a 1. Season 32, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 31. The 3 short stories this year are Toy Gory, Into the Homerverse, and B9 Rewind. My trivia for this one is that this episode aired on October 18th, 2020 in Canada, but was postponed to November 1st, 2020 in the US. And my best moment was the toys turning Bart into one of them. This year's Halloween episode got a 4 out of 5. Before we get into the main stories, which I did enjoy for the most part, I have to touch on the intro because I found it funny, in a way which probably wasn't intended. They put in some satire about the 2020 election, which mostly boiled down to bashing Trump. Of course, that was all the rage at the time, so I kind of expected it. But when they flashed up all the crappy things he did in office, I made sure to pause and look at them, and I reckon at least 75% of the criticisms of him could now be applied almost directly to Joe Biden. And that made me chuckle because it just shows you the absurdity of politics. No matter how bad a president may seem at the time, when the next one gets in, you realise that it ends up being no different really after all, and the pendulum just swings back the other way. Anyway, political nonsense aside, I loved part 1. It was a great Toy Story parody, with the inspired choice of making Bart into the Sid type figure. It's fun to watch the toys plot to get their revenge, and the sequence where he gets turned into a toy is quite impactful. Oh, and I guess I should mention the great animation. This is the best The Simpsons I've ever looked in 3D in my opinion. This was just the best segment in ages. Maybe even the best HD Treehouse of Horror segment. The second part was the weakest of the 3, but still decent. The various versions of Homer parodying various things was okay as a novelty, but there was no real stakes or action to anything that was going on. The final part was interesting, with Lisa and Nelson being caught in its death loop. The montage of their ridiculous deaths was quite well done, and it was just a solid segment all round. If I was ranking them individually, part 1 would be a 5, part 2 would be a 2 or 3, and part 3 would be a 3 or 4, so a 4 for the episode seems reasonable. This was for sure the best Treehouse of Horror in a while. Season 32, Episode 5, The 7 Beer Itch. When Marge and the kids take a seaside vacation, Homer is unwittingly tempted by a British woman named Lily Marlene. My trivia for this one is that the agreement Marge holds up has ZABF15 written on it, which is this episode's production code. And my best moment was Homer chasing after Marge's car. That was the best out of a very bad series of jokes. This one got a 1 out of 5. The story here was very poor. Right from the start, Willie being the narrator never made much sense to me. The only connection between him and Lily is that they are both British. There was nothing actually wrong with Olivia Colman's performance. The problem was that Lily's character archetype has been done many times before. Even the ending gag of her being obsessed by Homer lookalikes was taken from Noreen Lumpkin. The whole angle between Lily and Homer felt forced. They are clearly very different personalities, and there was no chemistry there. So because of that, I never brought into the marriage drama of Homer potentially leaving Marge. There was also a few cringe-worthy moments in the episode, from Mr. Burns coming out of the cake, to Marge's attempt at singing. Now I don't like to keep ragging on Julie Kavanagh's voice, we all know it is what it is at this point. But how could anyone listen to that bit and think it should be included in the episode, let alone used as a thing which won Homer back? At first I thought that it was meant to be a joke or something, showing how bad Marge sang compared to Lily, but I don't think it was. I think it was meant to be played straight, and that's just a bit sad to be honest. There was also one scene, and one scene only, of Bart being bit by ticks. Then that plot point was completely dropped. That sums the episode up really. It was a boring waste of time. Season 32, Episode 6, Podcast News. Marge and Lisa become addicted to true crime podcasts. But after Grandpa is accused of a crime, they struggle to believe he is innocent. So my trivia for this one is that Yardley Smith, Lisa's voice actress, makes a physical appearance in this episode. making her the second cast member to voice themselves after Dan Castellaneta. And my best moment was just seeing Lisa and Marge getting hooked on podcasts. This one got a 4 out of 5. It was just a very solid episode that did a good job exploring the podcast craze and how people are with it. We have had an episode about podcasts before, but in that one the focus was more on the production side. Here it was more on the consumer side, showcasing how into them people can get and how they can believe anything they hear on them. The show made some astute observations about how podcasts are almost replacing the mainstream media in some ways, and used Kent Brockman to show off that phenomenon. The Grandpa story was decent. I was initially expecting it to be just a subplot, so I was surprised when his new girlfriend turned into a full-on murder mystery. It was all handled pretty well. The revelation that Abe was too senile to remember the life insurance scam was a convenient way to end, but it was kind of amusing, so I will give it a pass. I do, however, have to dock this episode some points for not being that funny overall. There were not many good gags. Some of the observational bits with Marge and Lisa were decent, but that's all. The thoughtful plot was still enough to keep me engaged, though. Season 32, Episode 7, 3 Dreams Denied. Bart becomes a voiceover actor, and Comic Book Guy gets humiliated at Comic Con. So this episode was originally going to be titled The Voice Actor's Apprentice, but was changed. My best moment was Comic Book Guy's Dr. Octopus costume. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. It was a bit of an odd choice to split these stories into thirds. It meant they all came across as half-baked, and none of them could build up to any meaningful conclusion. Lisa's story of her getting a crush on a new talented kid was very cliché, and the revelation that he was putting on a nice guy act never really went anywhere. I was expecting something much more sinister after the scene of him and his red eyes. Bart becoming a voiceover artist had some mild intrigue. I like how he teases Homer over how much money he is making, and how the princess he is voicing turns out to be a badass, which vindicates him to all the bullies who were picking on him. I feel like this story would have been better as a full episode. Comic Book Guy's plot was bad simply because literally nothing happened. He goes to a convention to ask a question, only to forget it at the last minute. And that's it. Yeah, it was so pointless, there's not even anything there to analyse. At least some of the costumes were nice to look at, and Comic Book Guy grabbing different types of food with all of his octopus arms was quite a sight. Overall though, this episode felt shoddily put together, and didn't do enough to justify having 3 main stories. Season 32, Episode 8, The Road to Cincinnati. Skinner and Chalmers embark on a 800-mile car ride to Cincinnati to attend a convention, but they soon end up arguing. My trivia for this one is that as Skinner and Chalmers drove to Cincinnati, a restaurant called Steamed Hams can be seen, which was a nice little touch. And my best moment was Skinner and Chalmers making up. I gave this one a rating of 4 out of 5. Now the actual story here was fairly sitcom-y, with just about everything going wrong, but I have always liked the pairing of Skinner and Chalmers, and it was nice to see them carry an entire episode. The back and forth between them was well done, in that Skinner actually showed a backbone here. He was quite willing to stand up to Chalmers when he was being unreasonable, and his actions do save the day throughout the episode. The ending bit with a very sitcom-y coat swap worked well in giving Chalmers a chance to realise that, deep down, he does actually enjoy spending time with Skinner. It was a satisfying ending, and a rare moment of genuine respect between the two men. This wasn't the funniest episode ever. It wasn't densely packed with jokes. However, there was the odd nice moment mixed in to help the story out, like Chalmers strangling the guy at the airport, and the road trip banter in the car. This ended up being a fairly enjoyable episode. Season 32, Episode 9, Sorry Not Sorry. Lisa calls her teacher, Miss Hoover, a hack, and refuses to apologise. Then she learns about Miss Hoover's life circumstances. My trivia is that this is the first episode written by Nell Scovell since the second season episode One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish. And my best moment was just what I need, another woman who's always right. That quote from Homer about the GPS voice. This one got a 2 out of 5. After over 30 years, They finally tried to expand on Miss Hoover, and to be honest, I'm not sure it was worth it. Sure, I guess this could have been worthwhile, theoretically, if they had actually put the effort in to give us a deep look at her life and why she is the way she is, but we got to see her depressing apartment and that's about it. It very much mirrored what they did with Mrs. Krabappel. However, they expanded on Mrs. K more, and she was just a more sympathetic character to begin with. I mean, let's face it, Miss Hoover has always been a lousy teacher, and she's always been a bit mean to Lisa, so just giving her back pain in this episode is not enough to make up for the way she's always been on the show. So I never really felt what the writers were trying to make us feel, so because of that, I can only class this as a failure. Even the ending apology felt half-assed. Neither Lisa or Miss Hoover felt sincere about it. The jokes were not great, but there was enough here to stop this being a 1. As I said, Homer's quote about the GPS I found funny, and Milhouse joining the family under the blanket was also a decent gag. Season 32, Episode 10, A Springfield Summer Christmas for Christmas. A cable channel films a Christmas movie in Springfield, and Skinner develops a relationship with the director of the movie. So my trivia for this one is that the movie Mary references, where her father was killed during production, is the 1996 Arnold Schwarzenegger comedy Jingle All the Way, and my best moment was Bart having to sleep in Lisa's room. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. This episode is just incredibly tropey. Now I know they kind of lent into that, with the cliche bad Christmas movie, and a contrived ending, which they did call themselves out on, but there still needs to be some subversion going on to keep the viewer on their toes. The last time a movie was filmed in Springfield with Radioactive Man, they at least tried to add some conflict, with Bart, Milhouse and the filmmakers. Here though, the focus is all on the guest star character, Mary, and I just never found her interesting. Her and Skinner having this will they, won't they romance was kind of silly. They never seemed to have much chemistry, and it was obvious what would happen, but I will say Skinner rejecting her because her choosing him showed poor decision making was worth a smile. The big thing which was teased all episode was about Mary hating Christmas movies. The big reveal was that her father died while filming one. I was expecting something like that to be honest, and again, the impact was not that big for me, because I just was not that invested in her as a character. The jokes were also not great. I suppose Bart being forced to share a bedroom with Lisa, Maggie and the pets was a decent moment though. Season 32, Episode 11, The Dad Feelings Limited. Kumiko decides she wants a baby, but comic book guy is reluctant. We learn why he feels that way when his upbringing is revealed. So the movie they watch, Forward to the Past, is an obvious parody of the 1985 science fiction film Back to the Future, and my best moment was comic book guy trying to bond with Bart and Lisa. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I quite enjoyed this one. There was a lot of plot points and backstory crammed in. Maybe the bit about comic book guy's childhood was a bit rushed even. He is a prominent enough character to deserve this kind of treatment, but maybe they could have made that a separate story and got 2 episodes for the price of 1. That's not really a complaint though, as showing his upbringing did reveal why comic book guy is not that great with kids, despite interacting with them all the time. So of course it's understandable that he was hesitant to have them. I have complained in the past that the show was not done enough with Kumiko since they introduced her. Well, this went some way to rectifying that. I thought she actually brought some personality to the table here, with her bonding with Maggie, and her outburst at Homer and Marge. The ending was almost hinting that her and the comic book guy might actually have a child. I'm not sure if the show really goes through with that. It doesn't seem like a change that would add much of anything, to be honest. What stops this from being potentially a 5 is not enough really funny moments. I did like the visual gag of the boy that looked like Bart actually being at the house when Homer tricked Ned into babysitting the kids, and as I said, I also liked comic book guy's failed attempts to connect with Bart and Lisa. Those two were also done well here. They acted very much like kids, which is always nice to see in this era of the show. So yeah, this episode managed to keep me interested throughout, with a thoughtful story that actually made you care about the characters. Season 32, Episode 12, Diary Queen. Bart finds Edna Krabappel's old diary and takes inspiration from it. However, Lisa discovers that Bart has misunderstood what was written. My trivia for this one was in the ending slideshow, Edna was seen watching the Bob Newhart show, which Marsha Wallace herself starred on. And my best moment was Edna's words about Ned. This one gets a 3 out of 5. The basic skeleton of the story here is fairly solid, even if it's a bit predictable. But still the episode feels a bit disjointed because it focuses time on things it shouldn't. Like, I was enjoying the early scenes of Ned's yard sale, and Bart getting Edna's old diary, but then for a few scenes it became a Lisa episode, where she feels conflicted about lying to Bart, and has to deal with the stress. It's fine if you want to add in some conflict with her, but the scene of her going to the doctors, for example, was not needed. There was also a few one-off jokes which felt clumsy, like Chalmers yelling Skinner, even though he was nowhere near. They do have a tendency to overuse that joke. Again though, I go back to the core plot, which I found enjoyable enough to mostly make up for the shortcomings. It was nice to see Bart have a little success, even if it was a bit fluky and unearned, and we already knew it, but it was nice to get it confirmed again that Mrs. K did see some potential in Bart, and wanted to do the best for him. The ending bit of Flanders reading the nice things Edna wrote about him was a feel-good moment, and it gave the impression that the character left the show in a happy place. And of course the tribute to Mrs. Krabappel and Marsha Wallace at the end was nice too. It's good that the show pops back in on the character from time to time, just to make sure that she's never truly forgotten about. Season 32, Episode 13, Wad Goals. Bart starts making lots of money as a caddy at a private golf club, but Marge worries that it is ruining his character. So the title here is a pun on squad goals. And my best moment was Bart and his friends going through the hedge like the famous Homer meme. This one gets a 3 out of 5. Well, considering I am one of the rare people my age who actually likes golf, this episode suited me quite well. And no, it's not because I'm rich or snooty. I don't consider myself either of those things. I have just always found it a fun game to play, and I usually watch the majors on TV and such. Because of that, I got all of the golf references, like the hard 17th hole at Pebble Beach. This definitely helped my enjoyment of the episode, as the jokes were not great. I did like the callback to Homer the Hedge Terminator though. The meat of the plot was solid. Bart getting a lot of money, sucking up to Lee's rich golfers was fine. At first I thought Marge was a bit of a killjoy, spoiling it all for him, but at the same time I kind of get her not wanting him to lose his rebellious spirit. The SJW stuff was mostly irrelevant to the actual plot, but apparently the term is used only by right-wing trolls. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, Lisa. I'm not a troll or a right-winger, but there are some people who I would definitely ascribe that label to, on both sides of the political spectrum. So yeah, that detour never added to the episode at all. Same with the ending, which felt a bit forced. This was still decent overall though. Season 32, Episode 14, Yokel Hero. Cletus becomes a singing sensation. However, he soon turns on his fans and even his family. The title of this episode is a reference to the 1983 Scottish film Local Hero. And sadly, we are back to the dreaded none worthy of mention when it comes to the best moment. And that kind of gives away the episode's score of a 1 out of 5. I mean, there is very little I can say on this one. There is nothing positive to say, and it's not even bad in an interesting way. It's basically just a worse version of already mediocre episodes we have seen before. We've already seen a Spuckler family get into the music business, only here it made even less sense. Realistically, the Hollywood guy shouldn't have cared about Cletus this much, and Cletus himself was just unlikable to both Homer and his family. I don't even buy the ending being a happy one, because it's clear that when the chips are down, Cletus has no sense of loyalty to either Brandine or his kids. We've seen this side of him before in Yokel Chords, and to be honest, I think they should lay off the Cletus episodes for a while. He doesn't seem like the type of character who needs a spotlight episode every season, and that's what he's getting at the minute. When you combine that plot with no funny moments, you have the most painfully dull episode in a while. Season 32, Episode 15, Do PizzaBots Dream of Electric Guitars? Homer tries to reunite a mechanical band from his youth, but filmmaker J.J. Abrams gets a hold of them first. My trivia about this one is that Comic Book Guy mentions the redesign of Sonic the Hedgehog from the film of the same name, with side-by-side comparisons of before and after. And my best moment was Homer's improvised rap. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. This was slightly disappointing. We got even more backstory to Homer and Abe's relationship, and it is getting harder for the show to keep adding things, but I guess Homer having this job at a pizza place as a teenager is believable enough. The scenes of him working there were in fact the best of the episode. They were the only ones which had a few jokes mixed in, and I liked Homer's version of Ice Ice Baby. Also, the revelation that Gil got busted for cocaine actually explains a lot about him. After Act 1 though, the episode loses me a little. It was weirdly structured, in that they never gave us a reason to care about Homer's plight. I mean, it clearly wasn't a big deal. They even went out of their way to say that themselves. Yet Homer still becomes obsessive about it, and becomes a troll with comic book guy. That didn't really seem to fit. And when you tie it in with J.J. Abrams and his uninspired guest role, it's all a bit disappointing, as I said. Season 32, Episode 16, Manger Things. It's Christmas in Springfield, and as the Simpson family are decorating a tree, Marge tells a story about Homer and Todd Flanders. My trivia for this one is that this is the 700th episode of the series, and my best moment was the big thing of the episode, Homer helping Maude to deliver Todd. The 700th episode gets a 3 out of 5. I know this episode is hated by quite a large chunk of the fanbase, but I didn't think it was that bad. I guess the fact that it was quite a simple episode for the 700 kind of rubbed people up the wrong way. I don't really get why though. I mean, The Simpsons has never taken milestone episodes that seriously. The 500th one was the only real exception there. In fact, I would say this episode is better than a few previous anniversary ones, like Barting Over for example. Sure, I accept the marriage crisis, and Homer needing to do one great thing to show that he cares, were very tired tropes, and there were a few convenient things, which led to the ending, like the secret room in the garage, or Marge just happening to be there, as Homer delivers Todd. So I understand that people have valid criticisms of this episode, but I do think a lot of people went overboard on how bad this is. For example, some people point to the lack of continuity in the characters' ages, like Lisa being a few years older than Todd. To that I say, why be bothered by it? I mean, we all know by this point that the show's timeline floats all over the place. It could also be said that Maude was out of character, being so snarky and mean to Homer. However, she is on the brink of giving birth, so I think we can cut her some slack there. And it's not as if Homer was being a good, polite house guest anyway. In fact, he was being the opposite of that, so I don't really have a problem with the way Maude was portrayed here. On to the main point, which was the way Todd was born. I thought it was a nice moment. It was fairly understated, but I think that makes it a bit more relatable, to be honest. Now sure, in the context of the whole show, given we know what ended up happening to Maude, you can look at it in a different way, but I do try to review these episodes in a vacuum for the most part. As far as the jokes go, they were above average for this season. Sure, not all of them hit the mark, and some of them are telegraphed to hell, but at least they tried a lot of gags here, which meant that some of them did land. I like the acknowledgement that every Christmas and Homer story is of failing and redemption. Burns naming his hounds, like Santa's reindeers, I also found funny. I have spent a fair bit of this review defending this episode against what I feel to be some overzealous criticism that has come its way. Not that I think it's a masterpiece or anything, but I personally think it's a decent episode. Please leave your thoughts on this one in particular, guys. I am interested in whether you agree with me, or if you hate this episode. Leave a comment and I will be sure to discuss it with you. Season 32, Episode 17, Uncut Femmes. After Marge gets paired up with Sarah Wiggum on a field trip, she finds out there is more to her than it seems. So the title of this episode is a reference to the 2019 film Uncut Gems. And my best moment was the story of how Sarah Wiggum met Clancy. This one got a 3 out of 5. Now I can see why some people would consider this a great episode, as it was a refreshing change of pace that kind of came from nowhere. The heist dynamic felt reminiscent of the book job, and it was well handled by giving us a different angle on background characters like Sarah Wiggum and Lindsay Naegle, who we are familiar with but don't really know anything about. At first I was questioning whether Sarah Wiggum really needs a spotlight episode, but then I was like, why not? The show repeats the same plotline all the time, so anything different is already off to a promising start. And in fairness to this season, it has tried to experiment with a few lesser characters. Anyway, back to the plot. The revelation of Sarah's criminal past was interesting, as it was cool to see that she does have a more intelligent side to her. Marge getting roped into situations like this is always fun, because she's such a fish out of water. The ending of Chief Wiggum now knowing this side of his wife was also a worthwhile one. The jokes were the only thing stopping this from being a 4. There were not many I found funny, mainly because Homer and Wiggum took up a bit too much screen time. Same with Fat Tony hanging around with Ralph. As I said though, Sarah falling for Clancy in the middle of the heist was funny in an absurd type of way. I guess he was so bad at his job that it made her fall for him. I did end up enjoying this episode as something different, if only it was a bit funnier. Season 32, Episode 18, Burger Kings. Mr. Burns gets into the plant-based burger business, and after liking the taste of the burgers, Lisa decides to help him. My trivia for this one is that the scene of Mr. Burns and a hamburger on the raft parodied the movie Titanic, and my best moment was the couch gag. This one got a 2 out of 5. This episode ended up feeling like a worse version of The Old Man and Elisa, and it really was worse in every way. Not only was it nowhere near as funny, the plot was also nowhere near as believable. Burns has already betrayed Lisa numerous times by this point, so making Lisa naive enough to think that he was a good person just because she liked the taste of his new burger felt a bit off. The bits of Marge invested in stocks was just there. Nothing of note came of it, so it could have been done away with altogether. The ending had Homer try to do the right thing by revealing the truth about the burger business. It worked well enough because at least they foreshadowed the legal loophole of the words earlier in the episode. Overall though, this was far too stale to work, and it kind of sucks. When my favourite part of the episode was the couch gag with the Swiss pocket knife and the potato carvings. Season 32, Episode 19, Panic on the Streets of Springfield. Lisa gets an imaginary friend, in the form of an old English musician. Meanwhile, Homer gets a vehicle with awesome torque. My trivia for this one is that the Quillberry character is a reference to the 1980s pop star Morrissey, and apparently, he was quite angry with his portrayal in this episode, and wanted to file a lawsuit, which is pretty funny really, isn't it? And my best moment was, Lisa doesn't like it when other people talk, that line from Ralph. This one gets a 3 out of 5. The storyline here was decent, but kind of treaded familiar ground. Lisa feeling alienated is obviously nothing new, and even the imaginary friend dynamic has been done before. That being said, I do think that the core message driving Lisa's problems was decent. At first, this pop star she put up on a pedestal seemed like a good guy, who championed good causes, but it's actually revealed that he has a very arrogant and negative personality. This combined with Lisa seeing what he became as he got older, made her realise that being negative all the time is not the right way to live. Sure, you can take notice of real issues, but even if you're right about what you're saying, when you hyper-focus on negative things all the time, it will end up negatively affecting you as a person. It reminds me of that famous quote, if you gaze into the abyss long enough, the abyss will gaze back at you. That's why I think it's crucial that you always have some kind of hobby or pastime, which you really enjoy so that you can switch off if need be. Homer's subplot of getting a truck was okay. I did like how he dreamed that his truck saved the day. As far as Morrissey's portrayal, I'm not sure how accurate it is because I don't know much about him. But even if it was inaccurate, getting angry about your portrayal in a cartoon is never a good look in my opinion. As far as the funny moments here go, as I said, I really liked Ralph's line about Lisa never letting other people get a word in. She really can be like that when she goes off on one of her tangents. Season 32, Episode 20, Mother and Child Reunion. The Simpsons family visit a magic shop, where they learn that, in the future, Lisa and Marge fall out over college. So my trivia for this one is that the fortune teller machine from the 1988 film Big is seen at the magic shop, and my best moment was Lisa's talk with Bart. This one gets a 2 out of 5. This tried to be one of those future episodes that expands on the Simpson family members and what makes them tick. The HD era often does that well in fairness, but I think it messed up the execution here. For a start, I think Marge was badly out of character, not only with how hard she pushed Lisa, and how dismissive she became towards her, but also for saying things like, "You're living the life I wish I did," when Lisa said she didn't want kids or to go to college. Now, we all know that Marge loves her kids above all else, so if characterized properly, she would never be wishing that she never had any. Further problems here include the whole Lisa being president thing, which was told by a fortune teller before, so it was hard to get excited by that again. Also, the ending of Lisa and Marge making up was not very convincing, and did not make up for their bad blood prior. The open talk Bart had with Lisa was much more impactful. It was nice to see them freely admit that they do care for each other. It reminded me of a lesser version of the Treehouse scene in Holidays of Future Past, which is still a compliment. I also like the idea floated of not needing to finish college in order to be successful. That is something I very much agree with. I just wish the episode focused on that a little more. I feel that would have been a better foundation for Marge and Lisa's falling out. As far as the jokes go, they were okay. I dislike the Rod and Todd one, of them being basically the same as grown-ups, but I guess it was better than the one about them being gay. I did get a chuckle out of the fireworks that spelled out US government, brought to you by Disney. I mean, would that even surprise anyone at this point? Season 32, Episode 21. The Man from G.R.A.M.P.A. A British secret agent comes to Springfield in search of Abe, who he believes to be a Russian spy. My trivia for this one is that Grandpa rather hilariously got dishonorably discharged by Amazon Prime, and my best moment was Terrence and Homer getting drunk at Moe's. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This episode played it safe, with what on paper was a complex story. I was kind of expecting all kinds of weird things happening, when the plot revolves around a flying hellfish, an old British spy, and some Russians. I thought people would be going to jail, Mr. Burns would be getting involved with it, and all sorts. In the end though, not too much actually happens. There is this incompetent guy who befriends Homer, and then tells him Abe is a spy, only to find out it was all a misunderstanding. But Abe feels bad for the guy, and tells him he was right all along. I was left feeling slightly disappointed by the ending, because they definitely could have been more adventurous with the premise. The episode gets away with it for me though, because there was some fun to be had. Terrence's over-the-top stories were interesting, as was Moe doing the shadow puppets to accompany them. Homer's impressed, "You know everything," was pretty funny, given that he just gave away what all of his interests were. Overall, for a few funny moments and a somewhat interesting one-off character, I think this just about deserves a 3. Season 32, Episode 22, The Last Barfighter. After Moe breaks their most sacred rule, a secret society of bartenders seek revenge on Homer and his friends. My trivia for this one is that the episode title is a reference to the 1984 space opera film, The Last Starfighter, and my best moment was Homer listening to the Tequila song in a car. The season finale gets a 4 out of 5. The HD era of The Simpsons is usually at its best when it tries to mix up the format, and this episode continues that trend. The idea of there being this secret group of bartenders, a place where they are the ones who are listened to, was quite clever I thought. Them not being able to spill their secrets was also a nice way to add conflict to the episode. This was also somewhat of a parody of the John Wick film series, and they managed to mix the elements of those films in well, with the normal way the show works. I mean, of course Moe becomes this ninja fighting guy with his bar rag. Why would we expect anything less? The bits after the guys got de-boozed were also solid, seeing how much their lives changed in only 3 months. I like how Marge, Lisa and Bart cheered after Moe told them Homer would never drink again. Of course though, things rightfully, let's be honest, go back to normal by the end. But at least we got confirmation that Homer, Lenny, Carl and Barney do actually see Moe as a friend, so it was not all for nothing. There was also a number of entertaining moments here. As I said, I liked Homer vibing to the music in the car until he hears the word tequila. The Spanish talking skull that Bart won also had some good lines. The last line it has in the episode, when translated from Spanish to English, says, "Beware of the dangers of alcohol. Your family has a genetic predisposition to addiction, even the baby girl." That was a nice hidden joke. This was a good way to end the season. Welcome to the Season 32 summary. The overall average score for the season was 2.72, which is up from last year by a significant amount, but still nothing special. My bottom 5 episodes were 3 Dreams Denied at 5, Burger Kings at 4, Now Museum Now You Don't at 3, The 7 Beer Itch at 2, and the worst of the season was Yokel Hero. My top 5 were Treehouse of Horror 31 at 5, At 4 was podcast news, 3 was the road to Cincinnati, 2 was the Last Barfighter, and just about edging it out as the best of the season was the Dad Feelings Limited. As far as the overall standard of this season is concerned, it was definitely an improvement on the last one. I did note about season 31 that it did have a few glimmers of decent character stuff, so I was hopeful that this season would build on it, and it did, but in a very small way. It's definitely baby steps in the right direction, but hey, at least it went in the right direction. There were enough 4-rated episodes to fill out the top 5 at least. That may not sound impressive, and it isn't really, but that feat is by no means a given for the HD era. There was also some variety to this season. Episodes like The Last Barfighter and Carumbus changed up the format a bit, whereas episodes like Podcast News, Uncut Femmes, and The Dad Feelings Limited all expand on side characters. That was the best thing about this season, I would say, because it was a bit lacking in jokes, and the main family at times take a bit of a back seat to the secondary cast. I know a lot of people think season 33 was good, or at least a decent season, so I'm really hoping it builds on this one. You have all got my expectations up a bit for that one, so I really hope I enjoy it. We are long overdue a season which I don't have to call bad. Anyway, you'll have to wait until the next video for that one, as I'm all done for today. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please take the time to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.